Good afternoon and welcome to the July 10th, 2017 meeting of the Orlando City Council. We're going to begin today's, hey, Madam Clerk, if you would you read both 7 and 8, and then we'll have a briefing on what we're doing here as it relates to both of those.
Ordinance 2017-42, an ordinance of the City of Orlando, Florida relating to solicitation, amending the code of the City of Orlando, Florida as follows: amending section 36.20, incorporating exemptions, repealing section 43.86 entitled Panhandling, and section 43.87 entitled Solicitation and Off-Premises Canvassing on Public Property in the Downtown Core District, amending section 43.88, providing for a definition of Downtown Core District, amending section 45.02 relating to off-premise canvassing, amending section 51.02, exempting First Amendment activity from registration requirements, repealing section 51.06 entitled Charitable Solicitations in the Public Right-of-Way, amending and renumbering sections 51.06-1 relating to definitions, aggressive solicitation and identification of solicitors, repealing section 51.07 entitled Article Not Applicable to Churches or Religious Societies under Certain Conditions, and renumbering section 51.08 entitled Penalty, providing for severability, codification, correction of scrivener's errors, and an effective date.
Move to approve.
Second.
Hold on, we're going to take those up individually, but I want Alex to come up and update us. These relate to our panhandling and solicitation, and there's been a number of federal court decisions that call into question whether the ordinances that we have on the book are good and effective at this point. So we've been studying other cities and what modifications they have made, and I think we've come up with a pretty good couple of companion ordinances. But Alex, could you take us through that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the commission. If we could...
Can you turn his mic up?
If we could get the presentation on, please.
And then, Mayor, I think you were hoping to have both of the ordinances read.
Oh,
did you get through just the first title, clerk?
He just
Or?
got the first
Read
one.
both of those?
I only read the first one.
Okay, read the second one so that the explanation will
Yeah.
be about both.
Ordinance 2017-43, an ordinance of the City of Orlando, Florida relating to disorderly conduct, amending Chapter 43, Section 43.06 of the Code of the City of Orlando, Florida, making it unlawful to distribute to or receive materials from the occupant of a vehicle stopped at a traffic device, providing for severability, providing for codification, correction of scrivener's errors, and an effective date.
Okay, now Alex, as to both of these,
Do you need a motion on that, Mayor?
I'm going to let him explain both of them, then I'll take motions
Motions? Okay, got it.
individually for both of them.
Okay.
Presentation.
There we go.
Oh, there we go. All right. Now we got the presentation up. So we've had the opportunity, and just let me give you a little bit of background. First about myself. Obviously, I serve currently as a police legal advisor. But prior to becoming that, I had the opportunity to serve as the city prosecutor. So I was really in the trenches and seeing every day with the solicitation and disorderly conduct in our cities and making sure that these ordinances are protecting the safety and well-being of both the citizens of our city who are being solicited as well as those doing the solicitation. Just in terms of a little background now of the need for this change, 2 terms ago, the Supreme Court issued a decision called Reed versus the Town of Gilbert. And in this decision, it's a sign case which seemingly wouldn't apply to a panhandling case. However, at the core of it is a First Amendment issue. About 10 days after Reed was decided, the Supreme Court, without any further explanation, decided a case called Thayer versus City of Worcester. When I say decided, they actually just heard it and then said, based on Reed, since we just passed this, we need to send this back down and really take a look at it. So that's what happened. The Supreme Court sent the case back down to the circuits, and basically then the circuits were on their own to figure out how Reed applied and what that would do to panhandling ordinances throughout the country. So over the past little while, we've had the opportunity to observe what other cases and other districts and other cities are doing with their panhandling ordinances and with their solicitation ordinances. So we've had the opportunity to review cases from all over the country, from Portland, from Massachusetts, from Texas, and ultimately one from very near and dear to us, Tampa in our own district. And so as we had the opportunity to see what all these other cases are doing, we had the opportunity to see what was going right and what was going wrong in other cities. So fortunately, someone else got to pave the path for us. All right. So what changes have we proposed in this ordinance for our commission? First and most importantly, this would eliminate blue boxes throughout the city of Orlando. This is definitely one of the bigger changes throughout the ordinance. There wouldn't be any blue boxes, any special districts in the downtown core district. The ban on solicitation at night would also be eliminated. All the other rules would still apply to solicitations at night. However, the mere fact that it's at night would not be illegal in and of itself. This would also eliminate the ban on 2 or more persons soliciting together and eliminate the ban amongst other places at city parks. So what does it prevent? Primarily, it prevents aggressive solicitation. So a person who's currently engaged in using an ATM, someone who's trying to enter a lawful parking space, a person soliciting could not block that parking space. You're not allowed to harass or follow anyone with the intent to harass them. And you're not allowed to solicit a captive audience after a refusal or solicit anywhere on private property where no soliciting sign has been placed. We also then amend, as a companion to this, the disorderly conduct ordinance, which is on your agenda as item number 8 for first reads. And this, what it will do, was prohibit anyone from entering the roadway and giving or receiving any object from a vehicle that was on the roadway. So what matters is where the vehicle is, not where the person is. And this is really the crux of a public safety issue, because it is so dangerous for any pedestrian to enter into the roadway. And we saw on the consent agenda earlier, I believe it was transportation number 1, Mayor Dyer was pointing out how how concerned we are for the safety of our pedestrians within the city of Orlando. And so this really goes hand in hand with what the city is doing to make sure that our pedestrians are being protected and that you don't enter the roadway and engage vehicles. So how would this be enforced and trained? So what this does is it allows our officers to have a clear understanding of what can and cannot be enforced. Based on all those decisions that have come out throughout the country, our current ordinance has been a little bit diced up. So certainly right now, the at-night solicitation bans from sunset to sunrise is not being enforced by our police department because we have concerns over its constitutionality. So as a commission, if you pass these ordinances, it would give our officers clear idea of what they can and what they cannot do, and that really allows them to be effective in their jobs. It also addresses, as we just discussed, the public safety concerns. Primarily, all solicitation ordinances are public safety concerns in the city of Orlando. We want to make sure that both our visitors and our citizens, as well as those individuals soliciting, are protected in a safe environment in the city beautiful. Chief Ruan will also make sure that these changes, if they are approved by the council, will be sent out to appropriate schools and nonprofit organizations so that they can have a heads up and that they know their charity drives, what they can and can't do, and how to maximize their time in a safe and efficient manner. Also, our officers would be instructed on these changes, both at in-person annual training coming up, as well as with bulletins discussing all these changes and what they really mean. So with that, I just ask if the City Commission has any questions. We'd be happy to answer them for you. Thank you so much.
Okay, Commissioner Ortiz, Commissioner Sheen, Commissioner Hill.
Thank you, and thank you for that presentation. Can we go back to the presentation where he talks about the harassment and entering the road?
Yes.
Whoever is.
Can you call the president?
Harass, and I'm going to get a little technical here because I know that you attorneys get technical when you go to, what would be construed as harassment? Because if I go to somebody who's an ATM and say, hey, do you have any spare change? Would that be in the eye of the beholder, or is this, I mean, how do we determine that it's harassment?
Yeah, so the proposed ordinance actually defines the term harassment. It means to make any threats or demand that place the person solicited in reasonable fear of harm of his or her person or damage to his or her property. And this would be an objective standard. This is language that's taken and adopted from Florida statutes, specifically Section 1006.
So merely asking is not going to be harassment.
I'm sorry?
Merely asking is not considered harassment.
That would be correct. A single ask would not be harassing. Now, that said, of course, someone engaged at an ATM would be a prohibition that we have as aggressive solicitation in our ordinance.
Okay. All right, the second one I have is, you mentioned entering the road. I understand that exchanging from a vehicle not emotion, but stop at a stoplight or whatnot, or, an exchange of either cash, whatever they may be. If somebody comes over and solicits, that would be prohibited. But is it written as such in the, in the ordinance where it mentions entering the road for the purpose of?
So it's not about entering the road, it's about exchanging an object. After looking at what other cities have done right and done wrong, to ensure that individuals don't enter the road and don't do this and don't approach vehicles, any individual, what we actually have prevented is receiving or giving an object to a vehicle that's stopped in the road. It matters where the vehicle is, not where the individual is.
Okay, so, forgot my keys, I got out of the car, and I went to my friend and said, hey, I forgot the keys, so I ran in between lanes and said, give me the key. A police officer see me doing that.
So again, it would not be lawful to go into the street and receive your keys from another individual who's stopped at a traffic control device, so a stop sign or a traffic light.
Just a soliciting part.
Right, so there's no soliciting part to it. It's the actual entering the roadway it's the actual obtaining something or giving something to a car stopped at a traffic control device, because that behavior is so dangerous.
Okay.
So you could just ask your friend, hey, pull
So
over
we
to
will
this.
also train police officers and exercise discretion in terms of, because if they find out that it was a friend or whatnot, that for whatever reason they were exchanging, instead of stopping and making a big fuss and the person feeling offended by being stopped by a police officer because he entered the road to get something.
Yeah, so especially at the beginning of this ordinance, we
Okay.
want to make sure that the public is well aware of what's going on, and so that our officers, like all ordinances, always have the discretion to give warnings when they
And this
believe
can
it's
happen
appropriate.
at any time, day or night.
Correct, anytime, day or night, anyone who enters.
So that it would kind of preempt or it would kind of cancel out the fact of somebody being detained for soliciting at night in the middle of the road, because the police officers can go ahead and actually enforce.
Right, and this actually makes it easier for our police officers, because rather than having to try and, from a distance, hear what someone said, if they ask them for money, what they're doing, if they see that hand-to-hand transaction, which could also be used in other areas of the law, if they see that hand-in-hand transaction, they know something's gone wrong and they can make an approach and figure out what's going on and see if an enforcement action needs to be taken.
I appreciate it very much so.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Sheehan?
And Commissioner, if you ever forget your keys, I think we can get them to you without having to run out on the road. We want you to be safe, so absolutely. Will this allow someone to solicit and knock on people's doors at night? Because that's something that really freaks out a lot of people in the neighborhoods and the neighborhood meetings. They're very upset about when these door-to-door solicitors come at night, and they're not allowed to do that at night. Are they going to be allowed to come to people's doors at night now?
So a nonprofit solicitor, so a for-profit solicitor would still be covered by the other sections of the code. A not-for-profit solicitor, such as an individual trying to seek aid for themselves, would theoretically be allowed to go door to door. However, the citizens could take it into their own hands, put a no soliciting sign on their property, and then no one would be allowed to solicit on their property without their permission. So any citizen can take it into their own hands. If they don't want someone knocking on their door at night or any time of the day, they can put a no soliciting sign on their property and stop them from approaching that door.
Okay, and I've had a huge problem with the intersections, Mayor, so I agree. This has really become a huge public safety issue, especially at Mills and Colonial. It's gotten just absolutely ridiculous, and I know, Commissioner, whenever I'm coming off of I-4 at Princeton, it's constant, and as a woman driving alone, it's very, very intimidating, and I'm worried they're going to break out the window. I mean, it's just, this is a public safety issue, so I appreciate especially that, because that's become a real problem in my district as well, and that's all I had. Thank you.
Commissioner Hill?
Thank you, sir. I guess I have a few questions. And I totally agree about the safety issue. I'm having some homeowners also concerned about the intersection over on OBT and Colonial, which is prominent. But also have to remember over on the west side particularly, there's churches and youth football organizations and cheerleader organizations that stand on the side, or sometimes you might see them more so probably in the county, but more so in that Ivy Lane corner, what I represent, where these youth are asking with their football helmets for donations. Will they be arrested, or how would we work that piece out? Have we thought that far?
Sure. So obviously, our police officers will have discretion to make sure that they're doing this, but obviously, it's dangerous for those, cheerleaders and students to enter the street. So what they can do is they can stand on the side of the road, make sure they're out of traffic on a safe place. They can say, please donate to us, and direct them, hey, come in and park at this, 7-Eleven, or pull over to this legal parking spot, and then you can donate, or we can have our car wash at a legal place. But it stops individuals from entering the roadway. So we're not trying to stop individuals in high schools or anywhere from really raising funds. We just want to make sure that they do it in a safe way.
Are we going to stop the firemen from doing it?
In the roadway, we would.
Yep.
So
Just
They-
asking.
That,
Just
everyone needs
this
to make
bans
sure-
the boot.
Yeah, this is going to boot, actually, seriously.
So they can just, come over to a legal area and ask them to stop on, a legal parking area and then donate that way. So just entering the roadway is so dangerous.
Okay, now the other issue, when we start talking about those that might be homeless and soliciting coming out in the street, and are we going to ticket them multiple times? Are we going to arrest? And if there happens to be an arrest, will we assess them and see what services might be available for them?
So I think that asking what services are available is always probably the first line of defense. A lot of individuals are not doing this because it's something they want to do, but something they need to do out of necessity, because they might not know about these services that we're providing in the city of Orlando. So obviously our first responders and other individuals in Ms. Pampio Harris's office are making sure that the word gets out about what services are available.
Actually, I know we're doing that piece, but I'm stating law enforcement,
Yeah.
because they're going to continue to interact with these people that are panhandling. So if we could somewhat, while we're sending out the information to our officers versus arrest, is to assess and then also talk about these wraparound services and organizations that can help, because they're going to reoffend. I'm almost certain of that. So we're going to.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Commissioner, to make sure that they have.
Commissioner, although I don't view this issue as a homeless issue, I
Right.
view this as a solicitation
Right.
issue. And on a bigger picture, we as a community need to come up with a drop-in center, or whatever we need to call it, where we can divert those individuals rather than taking them to jail. So, but it's a different issue. I don't view the homeless issue as being part of this particular issue.
Okay, and you're absolutely correct, Mayor. When we send out this information, I saw we're going to send it out to schools in different places. Can we also have Susan Harris, Michelle Brennan to send it out to the tenant associations, the condo associations, and some of the homeowner associations to help us get this information out? And I think, and churches. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll move to Commissioner Ings.
Thank you, Mayor. Looking at the definition here, prohibits giving any object to or receiving any object from a vehicle stopped at a light or stop sign in the street. Now, that person that has a sign that says they're soliciting for food, they're soliciting for money, that kind of thing, that walks out into the intersection and they have not received anything, nothing has been given to them from that vehicle, but yet they have a sign and they're right there in the middle of traffic while the vehicles are stopped. Is that illegal? Because according to the definition that I see here, it's not.
Correct. So our ordinance doesn't address that specific concern. So anyone walking out into traffic outside of a crosswalk or other appropriate area would be in violation of a Florida state law for traveling in the roadway unlawfully. So that would be covered by Florida state statute. So our officers would be able to make contact with them for that. But if they were just merely walking back and forth in the crosswalk, it wouldn't be covered.
But we're not including that in this particular ordinance?
Correct, because the idea of walking into the street would already be covered by Florida statute, so we didn't want to run afoul of that.
Okay, and you wouldn't be running afoul of it, would you, if you were enforcing it?
So we can certainly enforce the Florida statutes, but by having an ordinance with a different penalty than the state statutes has, we might run into some legal issues with that. So we want to make sure that the Florida statutes are the Florida statutes and that our ordinance really targets the dangerous behavior that we've been seeing in our streets and on our intersections.
Because see that, well, and I guess, and hopefully that's part of the training for the police officers, that they look at the Florida statute to deal with those particular issues. So if we can strengthen that up in the training, that would certainly help, because that is the biggest start right there.
Absolutely.
Where they're walking into the street. They haven't received anything, but they've either gestured or hand signaled, hey, I need food, need money, and that kind of thing, and that's just as dangerous. And if we're just relying on this ordinance, then I think the officers are going to miss it. Public's going to miss it as well.
Right. Thank you, Commissioner.
All right. The other thing too is your announcements, getting the message out to the schools. This is a real big issue. So I think that there needs to be some type of PSA campaign specific, like click it, ticket, and that kind of thing, so that people are aware that this is for real and that the city of Orlando is taking this type of action to make sure their streets are safe, and so that everybody could see it. So, you know, you need some type of commercial campaign, Mayor, to deal with this as well. So it goes beyond just sending a message to the kids in school. Right now, school's out, so
Yes.
what are we going to do in the meantime? That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll move to Commissioner Stewart.
Alex, thank you. I got a lot of questions, and let me kind of cover a couple of things. The first is, it seems to me that we have really kind of two areas of solicitation we're looking at. One is the solicitation at home, somebody's coming to my house.
Sure.
And then one solicitation really in public areas, if you want to call it that, and then that gets defined a different, a third or fourth way. So I really have a concern I don't understand, and I'm trying to read it over the weekend, and I'm just really uncomfortable. I don't understand how we have to remove the place of solicitation as a violation completely from the ordinance. When we basically have said on the place of this is that you can't. We used to say you can't solicit on a bus stop or train stop. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Any public transportation, any vehicle, any sporting facility. Now, if what we're saying is that that's a captured audience, and we're now going to define that as the captured audience, I don't see that connection between the two.
Sure.
So we basically said you can solicit anywhere you want to, except that the object of a bus or train stop, it's a captured audience. I can't go anyplace else. I'm waiting for the bus.
Right.
But I don't see us taking that kind of captured audience where I can't go anyplace else and having that better defined.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
So the captive audience is basically an audience that isn't free to get away from the message. So certainly someone riding a bus would be a prime example of a captive audience.
But it doesn't say, remember we said before, a bus or train stop, not riding a bus.
Right, so someone...
I'm at a bus stop. I can't get away from him because I'm have to stay at the bus stop. So you consider that a captive?
Well, so it depends on what you're doing at the bus stop, of course. If you're someone waiting for the bus, and that's your mode of transportation to work that day, you would be considered a captive audience. However, the mere fact that it's a bus stop, you know, if someone's just standing there because they want to hang out at the bus stop, they would not be a captive audience. So what we had done on the old ordinance was really paint with broad strokes. We kind of painted a house, you know, big sprays of areas, you know, no nighttime, basically carved out most of downtown, no bus stops. What we're trying to do is go back and really use a fine-tooth kind of brush to make sure that we paint the details that we need to protect our citizens. So just because you're at a bus stop isn't necessarily enough to be protected, because you could still theoretically walk away from that if you're not the individual waiting for the bus, if that makes sense.
I would like to figure out a better, I understand what you're saying, but I'd like to figure out some kind of better definition. We say public street, any vehicle in the street. So you're saying that's removed because you can't be on the street as a violation of, outside of the crosswalk as a violation of state law.
So that's removed for a couple reasons. So the crosswalks issue is one why we didn't put it back into our disorderly conduct, but you are allowed to, and the courts throughout the country have said that individuals are allowed to solicit individuals on the vehicles on the street. So you could stand on the sidewalk holding a sign up that says, please donate $1 to XYZ charity. That would be protected under the First Amendment. So that would theoretically be prohibited under the old ordinance, under the current ordinance. And so what we're trying to do is go back with that fine-tooth brush and really paint the specific behavior that we're trying to curtail, which is individuals going out into the street to collect money or to collect items or to give items, which is where they are really in danger. So holding the sign on the sidewalk, not really putting anyone in danger, so that's why that's not being included.
Let's go back to the football kids at Parr and Edgewater.
Sure.
So they're walking along the sidewalk with a sign that says, I'm collecting money from my football team.
Mhm.
That's completely okay, not an issue. I got a sign, that's all right.
Right, so that's all right. Hopefully the sign would direct them to a lawful parking
Right.
area.
When he now walks, when the 12-year-old walks across the street and stands in the median on Edgewater Drive, where is the violation for that?
So unfortunately, there is no violation for standing in the median. That's one of the things that we struggled with for a while. However, the courts throughout the country have really said that medians are part of the public way and that just holding a sign in the median is no more dangerous. Now, obviously, we're talking about medians where there's enough area to really stand and be safe. But
Well, I'm not. I'm talking about a median that's 3 feet wide, that's covering 2 lanes of traffic, each going 40 miles an hour. I mean, to me, it's a dangerous position, but if they're allowed to stand there with a football helmet and shaking a football helmet in front of guys that are ready to do a left-hand turn, is that legal? And if it is legal, doesn't it seem like there's a public safety issue to protect a 12-year-old from doing that?
absolutely, Commissioner. Unfortunately, the courts have repeatedly struck down ordinances throughout the country where ban general holding a sign on the median. Now, of course, if the individual tried to receive anything from a car, so of course our officers seeing this individual could approach him as a concerned officer and say, listen, son, you're not allowed to receive anything, so standing on here is not going to raise any money. Unfortunately, you can't receive any money here, so you need to make sure that you go to a safer place to really make sure that you do this in the right way. So that part of this would be education.
So we now have back to the fire boot. We have exactly the same. They're okay to stand in the crosswalk and hold their boot, but they're not allowed
They
to
can't take the
walk
money,
down the
yeah.
street to collect the money from somebody.
Right? They can't collect the money from the vehicle.
Okay. It just seems
But
to
it
me.
removes the reason for them to stand out there.
Yeah.
There's no reason to just stand there with a boot and watch
Yeah.
everybody drive by.
Right.
Well, I mean, it seems that in some ways we've made it a little easier, some ways we've made it more difficult.
Right.
Let me cover my last point, which I've shared with Deputy Chief Rolone. One of the issues I have is the issue of enforcement. As long as we're committed to enforcement, then I think we're all kind of happy with it, even if it means that we have to kind of move some resources into that. Because that's an area that bothers me a great deal. Now, along with what Commissioner Hill has said, I've had a long talk with Chief Rolone, and one of the things that we want to try and do is do exactly what you're saying in terms of providing the resource of giving resources there. We've begun the process of going one step further and saying there may actually be a way for us to have financial resources to be able to help with a transitional housing or emergency housing for that person that's on the street. So when the guy says, I need $10 for housing, we may be able to move him into housing and have a grant that would help pay for that cost and be able to take him off the street. If he wants to get off the street, we'll help him right then. If he doesn't, it comes back, then we have another way to enforce what he's doing on the street. And so that's the idea of trying to move down this path a little bit easier. We have well, though, Mayor, I think I agree with you, this isn't a homeless issue, but it is, in fact, exemplified or looks like a homeless issue in that those people who are on the streets use that as an excuse to collect money. So we are caught between kind of what we think it actually is to what the public perceives it to be. And this is a difficult challenge that we're going to down the narrow. Let me give you your example. There are many people who give examples of the guys who are collecting money on the street and they go get in their Mercedes-Benz and drive away.
Sure.
And there's others that stand on the road that need help because they have no other place to go. And we have to kind of figure out where we go to community policing to help solve that problem. And the community policing not all the time is just giving a ticket or putting a guy in the back of a police car. We have to figure out what that balance is. And that becomes a real hard balance. So training, Chief, training becomes paramount, at least what I believe. I think it falls in line with where I think First Amendment rights go, but it also concerns me about enforcement. And I think that in some cases we may have created other issues that we have to address. Like we need to stay on top of it to make sure that we can close those loopholes as fast as possible.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Ortiz.
Last quick chance here. I'm pretty sure, especially working with the police department, most police officers that come and complain to you that they confront people that are, even though there's special cases of people that are looking for housing or they're looking they're legitimate about looking for food. But in the majority of the cases, some of these guys are looking to sustain some vices. And of course, we're there to help them and to try to make it better for them while not compromising the safety of the people, which is our main concern here. And we know the target, well, I shouldn't say target, but the people we're dealing with and the people we'll be addressing with this particular ordinance, I think it's more those that are consistently coming back to the streets, even though we tell them we have rehabilitation places, we have ways of helping you, but they don't want that help. They want to continue maintaining their vices or whatnot by asking for money out on the streets, and those are the ones we'll pretty much be dealing with on this particular cases. I think that's where we're heading with this, am I not?
I would agree with you, Commissioner.
Okay.
I believe that's correct.
So, all right, thank you. And thank you so much for the work that you guys are doing. That's awesome. Thank you.
Okay, this discussion has been on 2017-42 and 2017-43. So I'd like to have a motion
So
on
moved.
42.
So
Motion
moved.
by Commissioner Ortiz, second by Commissioner Raines. Now I have a number of appearance request cards, and they are all signed up for
Old Bellamy, 456 West Oak Ridge. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here on behalf of, first, with the presentation that was presented. I hear him, and I'm no knocking him, no disrespect at all. He said he did a lot of research on that, and this is what he came back. I think his research that he has done has been basically from the prosecution side of the table, and not actually from the solution side of the table as a mixture of the audience, because what's going to happen is everybody here is talking about the homeless situation, then we get to the public safety part with the children in the programs, but no one's not talking about what resources will be put in place for those students who are on these sports teams in the local community, who are not at the school level or at the church level, but they have community organizations that have traveling AAU teams. There's nonprofit organizations that are also based in the community. There's no one talking about the resources for them to get funding, but the funding will go to big corporations from the city of Orlando that's coming into the city, and it seems like everything's being adopted from outside of Orlando. As a city, there's going to be an initiative that Orlando creates a model for other cities to look in on. The blue box theory remind me of where I spent 11 years and 9 months of my life in prison, where you limit it to your movement, you limit it to the things you could do, and they're strategically placed in locations where there's not a lot of flow of traffic. So when you have individuals who are homeless who got to get money to pay for bed space and they can't get the money, you're going to send them to a crime matter of what? Stealing now, burglaries, or some type of drug transaction to now get funding to pay for the things that they need. It goes down to a bigger perspective of saying, what solutions holistically can he present with the, speaking with people who are homeless, speaking with grassroots organizations, and to tell a car that's traveling, pull over to a public place, where the public place, that car that's on the way to work or on the way to shopping or on the way to somewhere, going to pull over to give the young man or either fire department $1 or $2. These people are traveling, they're coming and going. But the thing is, safety definitely needs to be a measure. It maybe need to be where, though, when the children are out there, it's the adults that go to the median to retrieve it at their own risk or something. Not sending the children out there and then hold accountable the staff members accountable for sending the children out to the median, because you're putting that child's safety at risk. So we need to maybe twerk it to where as though it benefits the city public safety and also not deterring people from saying, I'm not doing a program because I relied on doing this, but now I'm at Newton Boulevard and if there's no public place, it's all churches, it's all private property, homeowners. Where can you pull over at that's public property? There's nowhere. So the children are going to miss the opportunity to seek help. We go talk about the churches. The churches have services. They pass the tithe. They can do all that. But the local organizations do not have a facility to people to come in to actually do and host events like that. So I think it needs to go back and come back with a little bit more fruitful on both sides of the table before anything is ruled upon about saying this is what it's going to be. Because now you're going to send officers on a mission, and some of these individuals do have mental issues, and they know they're sincerely hungry, they are sincerely hurting, and they're trying to seek something, and you have an officer just doing his job. So now you're putting the officer in a situation by confronting someone with a mental issue, because why? He's just trying to get some money to get something to eat with. So it has to be a little bit more ironed out, a little more detailed before we rule and make a suggestion saying this is what it is. Then to talk about how you're going to send out a letter to all organizations. There are some organizations who are not even listed in the Rolodex book that they might send out to. So they're going to miss the memo. Like I said, schools are not even in session. So we have to look at it, a holistic situation, and see what we can do. And I'm not sure what cities he looked at, but I can tell you 3 cities that I was on commission: Trenton, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Wilmington, Delaware, all the same situation of soliciting and panhandling, and you got to define which is which and who's the target artist and what is the repercussions at what level. Thank you.
Okay, Jose, you're the cleanup hitter. 42, is there a discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Okay, ordinance 2017-43 has already been read. Is there a motion to
So moved.
approve?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Ings, second by Commissioner Sheehan. I don't have any cards related to that. Discussion among commissioners. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, so the motion carries, and that concludes the official business of the Orlando City Council for today.